Hi, my name is Julie Johnson, and this is a video that I am doing as an introduction to U.S. constitutional amendments. I'm hoping that this video will be applicable for both online and traditional classrooms, brick and mortar classrooms, and will also be applicable to discussions in all of my history classes. So, for example, History 111 is United States history through Reconstruction, and we certainly look at the framing of the United States Constitution and the Civil War and the amendments that follow, known as the Reconstruction Amendments. I'm also hoping that for History 112, certainly conversations about Reconstruction Amendments that we look at in History 112, history from the Reconstruction era all the way through the 20th and even hopefully 21st century. So this discussion of Reconstruction Amendments can be very applicable to History 112, and also certainly connecting that Reconstruction era to the Civil Rights Movement through a discussion of our amendments as well. And finally, for my History 120, my female historians, this is my women's history class. And Women in American History, we look at all of this history from the founding of our country through hopefully the 20th and 21st century. So again, through a lens of gender and sex, we're looking at some of these very same issues. So the issues of the United States Constitution and the amendments are applicable to all three classes. Excuse me. So to start, I wanted to have a brief discussion about the amendments as written. When the U.S. Constitution was being written, many of the framers of the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention believed that the Constitution as written didn't end up having enough individual rights represented for American citizens. So James Madison was tasked with the writing of amendments or changes or additions to the original document, which is the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is made up of articles. Articles are different than amendments. The amendments to the Constitution were added to the Constitution as written by Madison, and that's why Madison is known as the father of the U.S. Constitution. For that reason and many others, he advocates to get the Constitution ratified throughout the United States. And so that first 10 amendments to the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. Many people are familiar with at least the First Amendment to the Constitution. That First Amendment, if I ask students in my class what it means to be an American, what democracy means, or what the rights are that citizens have in this country, usually they mention something that's already listed in the First Amendment to the Constitution, maybe even the Second Amendment. So freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, these are all Madison's ideas, individual rights that are listed in those first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment on its own is actually a beautiful amendment written by Madison, a very circular amendment where he starts actually in that amendment talking about the idea of freedom of spirit or freedom of the intellect, which manifests itself in freedom of religion. That intellect or that freedom is then sort of can manifest itself in freedom of speech, right? We also see that freedom of speech then being more organized in a more public setting in freedom of the press and the responsibilities that go along with that, and then the freedom to assemble. So that one amendment encompasses so much of what we believe to be American rights and the rights of the citizen. So the first 10 amendments, I'm not going to go through all of them. You may know quite a few of them. Individual rights, the right to trial by jury, the right not to incriminate yourself. You take the fifth, you're taking the Fifth Amendment. But the 11th and 12th Amendments are added to the Constitution fairly quickly in succession of U.S. history. The 11th Amendment is added to the Constitution in 1794. It's ratified, meaning it's approved by the United States government, and the states are ratifying these amendments. This amendment talks about the United States not having the power to extend any suit in law or equity against the states themselves. And the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, which is ratified at the beginning of the 19th century, is an amendment that sort of changes the way we elect president and vice president in the United States. As the Constitution is originally written, the president is elected as the man or woman, but historically only men, the man who has garnered the most votes, and then the runner-up would be the vice president. We know that that's not going to work. We certainly, if we were using that example for the 2016 presidential election, that would give us Donald Trump as president and then Hillary Clinton as vice president. And we can see the derisiveness clearly in a situation like that with political parties. So by 1804, it's important to have that change to the Constitution, and we get that in the 12th Amendment. But the three amendments I want to look at in more detail today are what are known as the Reconstruction Amendments. Because after 1804, we don't see another change sort of really needed to the Constitution until that very, very divisive and difficult Civil War and that Reconstruction period that comes in the mid-1800s. And so by 1865, we will get another amendment to the Constitution, that is the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, and that bans officially forevermore slavery in the United States. Why do we need an amendment to the Constitution when we have the Emancipation Proclamation? Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation is really an executive order, right? It's a presidential order. It will not hold as a change to that Constitution unless you actually have the official amendment. So 13th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is it's my favorite, it's a very important amendment, and this is an amendment that talks about birthright citizenship, and then consequently those citizens have equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment is terrifically important throughout American history. Our women will be looking at the 14th Amendment as well to sort of see how that amendment reflects their rights under the law. And it's absolutely one of the most popular amendments even today by our standards today, certainly in the news a lot today. The last Reconstruction Amendment is the 15th Amendment, and that amendment gives the right to vote to all men, citizens in the United States, regardless of race or color or previous conditions of servitude. But ladies, again, I ask you to look at that amendment. The 15th Amendment does not include gender or sex. And so our women in our women's history will be truly disappointed in that they are not included in this suffrage, that this enfranchisement that these American citizens are getting with the 15th Amendment. It will not be until the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, so a full 50 some odd years after the 15th Amendment, almost 73 years after the original Seneca Falls Convention, where women are advocating for women's rights, we will finally see the 19th Amendment ratified as a constitutional amendment that will give women suffrage rights based on their sex or gender. So I hope you enjoyed this quick video, and hopefully it was helpful in explaining some of our amendments.